there are pockets of poverty all around us in Sioux Falls, no matter what neighborhood you live in. And so it is those folks that are providing services for us. When we look at income distribution in the community, we talk about our paramedics, we talk about our preschool teachers, we talk about our firefighters in some cases, those first time just out of school folks, not making a whole lot of money. And that's not a dig.
No.
It's just the beginnings of a career. These are good, hardworking folks.
Welcome back to our next episode of 50 Faces of Feeding South Dakota. We're glad to have you here today as we have more conversation around food insecurity and the work that's being done within our communities and our state to fight hunger. Today, we're meeting with Michelle Erpenbach, who is with Sioux Falls Thrive, and we're going to talk more specifically about the Sioux Falls community, which is where you're really focused, versus the statewide focus that Feeding South Dakota has. But I think we're going to cover a lot of ground today while we have conversation. Are you ready for that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Great. Well, tell me a little bit, Michelle, first about what your role is with Sioux Falls Thrive and what Sioux Falls Thrive is.
Yeah, you bet. Sioux Falls Thrive is the Cradle to Career Workforce Development Initiative for Sioux Falls. It was created in 2017, so it's still a really young organization. And our goal is to work in those areas around the schools. We have a great school system. Many of our schools in South Dakota do. But we're looking at those things that a kid needs besides that. I mean, they only spend 20% of their time in a classroom. That always blows me away when I think about that stat. Only 20% of their time is in a classroom. The rest is at home or elsewhere, some sleeping, of course. So we're looking at that ecosystem around those kids, where we look at affordable housing, we look at what the kids are doing when they're not in school, that out of school time, and we look a lot at that food security area. It comes down to that idea of, if we talk cradle to career, we're talking third grade reading as a third grader. You need to be able to read at the third grade level as a third grader. And if you're struggling, you don't know where you're sleeping tonight or whether there's going to be dinner on the table tonight, that spelling test or that reading that you're trying to do, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, when we talk a lot about our child hunger programs, a lot of the questions we get is, how does hunger impact kids? Like, how is that? And I know the school lunch is a hot topic, but to your point, I mean, as a child, when you're uncertain of things, that creates anxiety. And research has been done that kids who don't have that food security are more likely to test lower than their peers. They're more likely to have behavior issues like ADHD. They have trouble concentrating in the classroom because, they're distracted by a growling stomach or things like that. And so, when you talk about affordable housing and looking at those other things, you're talking really about root causes, but it still comes down to that basic need of food being provided.
Absolutely. That they call it the social determinants of health. We're talking about basic health needs when we talk about these three areas. And so, no, that's exactly right. When we talk about kids and being hungry, it really comes down to their overall health, but also their security around that. Do they know that something's going to be available for them? Did they have breakfast this morning before they left? Or did, in some cases they end up with a bag of Chalkies or, and
not necessarily a nutritious
Right?
breakfast.
It's, it's something, but it doesn't get you very far, So those are huge pieces. When we talk about cradle to career workforce development, we really talk about how are we preparing every one of our kids in this community. And we know, based on, the data is there, you reference, various studies. All we have to do is look at the data coming out of the Sioux Falls School District. We know that those areas of the community where food security is an issue, there are also then food or school issues as well, behaviors and testing and all of those sorts of things. It shows in the data.
Is there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a huge piece of what we do. We're constantly thinking about what's the future for Sioux Falls in terms of not only these kids and their parents, the kids that are in school right now, but these kids growing up and graduating from high school, we hope, Are they going to go to college? Are they going? What's the next step for them? But so many of them, that data holds true as well. So many of them are going to stay in Sioux Falls. They are our future workforce. What are we doing to help them be ready to be the best they can be?
And break that cycle, because food insecurity can often be part of a cycle. If you grow up in poverty and all these things impact your ability to be successful, then you're likely to continue in poverty, or just continue to have those impacts generation upon generation.
Yeah.
And so being able to come together and give success way from the beginning, so that everybody's on the same footing, that equity, really, when you talk about it.
Yeah, it is. It's a matter of fairness, and when I'm talking with people about the kids that we serve, the families that we serve, they're really all of our kids. It's not, I have 3 grown children now, everyone's got their own kids, but the kids we're talking about are all of our kids. And it really, their experiences today are going to ripple through our, and not just in their own homes, as you say, with their generational, we talk about generational wealth all the time. Generational poverty is as real as anything else. If we're talking about that, can we then acknowledge as a community that it's in all of our best interests to break that?
Yeah, and it's one of the statements that we use a lot here at Feeding South Dakota too, and I think it's on our website where we say that, and it's true, we believe that when communities are nourished, especially children, everybody then thrives, right? Because, I know I was at your presentation of the child care piece last year, and just even the impact of when one parent chooses to stay home because they can't afford child care, fewer people are in the workforce. And we want Sioux Falls to work. We want to have people in jobs that are open and have the right candidates and have people utilizing those skill sets. So having, the ability to help with childcare or get childcare to a manageable place helps Sioux Falls be a more effective workforce and a greater community.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the arguments always about childcare is, well, why doesn't the mom or dad, why doesn't somebody just stay home with those kids? We do the math on that, and that literally sets that worker behind for the rest of their career.
That was the most impactful thing, and I have used that. Over and over again about how you think it's the right solution, but now actually you're further behind than you were with both parents working. And that is oftentimes then how people end up needing food access through our programs as well, because you still have 2 working families but high child care cost, or one family member who's not working, but they still make too much money and they don't qualify for federal assistance programs, but they still need food. And so they end up at our mobile food distribution, or kids are getting our backpack or using our school pantry program in addition to the school lunch and the school breakfast. And so we kind of step in, and I know Sioux Falls Thrive does too in a food insecurity way, to say, here's some resources and here's some availability for you. But it's just so interesting how one piece of that puzzle can have such a big impact. And then what if you're paying really expensive childcare and you're not, making the right amount of money within your position, and now somebody gets sick and you have a high medical bill? It all just compounds.
Right, exactly. I often use the example of particularly that part of the community that's north of 18th Street. We talk about the number of personal vehicles in that part of town. The ratio of humans to personal vehicles is lower there. There are fewer cars available. So if we're cousins, we're sharing a car and
probably a house.
Right? I live down the street maybe, and the battery on our shared car is dead, and I don't have extra to buy a new battery, neither do you. So then how do we get to work? And so all of those issues are woven together, and they come back to that idea of, well, if we don't have a car and we can't get to the box store where we generally go to get reasonably priced groceries, is there a food giveaway close by? Can we walk there? Can the kids walk with us to some sort of other option? We really, as a community, have to start to think about how do we make those things accessible. And I think we've done a really great job of it, particularly with those neighborhood-based programs.
Feeding South Dakota transitioned to mobile food distributions in COVID as a response to COVID. There were already some, but that really amplified that program where we brought the food resources to where hunger was, right? And there are some of our distributions where you volunteer and you work at it and you're like, we're in the neighborhood we need to be in, right? I mean, people are not only in line in their vehicles for food, but they're coming out. You can literally watch them walk out of their homes or apartment buildings and come and line up and walk through to get food. And that's when you're in the right place. I mean, really, really well, because the transportation is an issue, right? And so when you can get to that space and have that food available, and what we provide is not a month's worth of food. I mean,
Right.
it's just that's not an opportunity that we have. It's 50 to 55 pounds of food. It's a variety of things that hopefully, if families have a minimal budget or some SNAP benefits, they can complement what we're giving them to make some meals. But that's meeting the need now. It is not setting up for solving it for the future or addressing those social determinants and those root causes, which is some of the work that you're doing at Thrive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We use a model that's called collective impact, and what it really means is we bring everybody to the table, whoever's available, whoever's interested in a particular topic around those areas, and we're really then looking for solutions without duplicating services,
Yep.
but with using existing resources and seeing if we can't do it better. There are some things happening. We always say that this community is program rich. There are programs to do all sorts of things on behalf of people in need in this community. And it's wonderful. It's a generous, wealthy community. It's a wonderful place to be. But as we're program rich, we're also systems poor. And so sometimes we literally are drawing maps of all the various organizations that are involved with, in this example, food security. And it's like, this group is doing the same thing as that group, and they're both asking the same people to write checks. Can we figure out how do we make that donor dollars go farther?
Yeah.
And how do we make that work more efficiently and more collaboratively? And so that's where we start to get into some of the really fun long-term solution finding. And we end up with some great things, like Thrive was involved early on in those conversations with Feeding South Dakota when it was clear that the food bank, the food pantry, was going to have to close.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yep.
can come shopping. We all remember all the days of masks and
Oh, boy.
not 6 feet and not 3 feet and all those sorts of things. Got to close that, and that line of, let's figure out how do we take food to where hunger is. That was all part of, Feeding South Dakota had a lot of people involved with it, but they sat at the table with Thrive people too as well, with the volunteers from across the community, and went, how do we do this?
What does it look like?
Yeah. And they in those days, and it was before I started in this position, they were trying it in various locations and all sorts of things. That's how it works, though. If we really are willing to put our neck out there and go, let's just give it a shot and see what happens, then you come up with some of these great solutions.
Well, so many businesses, you mentioned donor dollars, but so many businesses have competitors, right? You shop here, you shop there, you buy this brand or you buy that brand. Food insecurity, or the fight to end hunger, is not like that. It's not a competitive place. And actually, when you look at a community like Sioux Falls, and you said we're very rich in that, you can get a hot meal or access to food anytime, any given day. And so, it's important that we're not duplicating, and that we're able to identify where do the resources need to go, what are those resources, and how can we do it in the right way, so that, Feeding South Dakota might be here on the first Tuesday, but another organization might come in to this space on the following Friday, and then 2 weeks later, Feeding South Dakota might be in that space, so that it continues to help expand and grow that opportunity for individuals who need that food access.
And I think it's important for us and as a community to recognize that we have folks in such dramatic need that is not that example is not duplication of services. That is making sure that those folks in the deepest need have access where they really need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, we'll see a lot of comments on our social media in regards to our mobile distributions. If there's a fifth week of the month, or as we get to the
Right.
end of a month, if we don't have a mobile distribution, people will say, well, this is when we need it the most. And so it is that ability to continuously provide. And, there's something about feeding children and bringing children into the equation. And, anybody can look at an adult and think of all the reasons why they think that person should not be food insecure, without realizing what the situation is. We never know. People will come to our mobile food distribution and they might be in a nice vehicle, or they have a dog with them, or they have a cell phone, and at times will be comments about, well, that's too nice of a vehicle. What are they doing in this line? But it could be somebody who's picking up food for someone else, or they had to borrow their boss's car to come get that food, or that dog might be the only thing that they have that is meaningful to them. The cell phone might be the only way that they're able to apply for jobs and stay connected. So we try really hard to pull that judgment out of it, because it's not about why they're here. It's that they are here, and what can we do in this moment? But you bring kids into it. Kids can't go get a job. Kids can't, there's a lot of things kids can't control within that situation. And so focusing on that child hunger is a really important thing to do.
No, it absolutely is. The example I use when we talk about, because I've volunteered at some of these, at some of the drive-throughs as well, and I see the cars and all of that. The example I use is the blue spots in the parking lots at grocery stores and wherever, disabled parking. And someone who looks perfectly fine parks there and gets out. They have the sticker, they have everything they need. Who am I to judge why they have that blue sticker?
Yeah.
Same with, who am I to judge whether that family deserves food or not?
Well, yeah, and we live in a part of the country that's a very proud people. And for many people, it's difficult to even, I mean, I've walked the lines in various communities and asked people if they want to share their story or let them know we're taking photos. And I don't want my car in the photo because I live in a small town and I don't want people to see that I'm in this line. And so I think we have to respect the fact that if somebody's there and asking, we just have to trust that they're really in a need at that moment, and we have to meet that need. And especially now when food insecurity rates have just continued to go up. All the things that happened during COVID, the influx of food to the food bank, the community support, the benefits, the child tax credits and things, moved people in one direction, and then prices went up and those benefits went away, and food security just jumped.
Oh, we're watching the data on a regular basis. We watch, the Feeding America has a great cost of the meal kind of data on there, and then we watch the USDA and the Census Bureau. In South Dakota, where we grow the world's food, we have a food insecurity rate across the state that rides around 8-9%, and that's counting the adults.
Yeah.
And so I look at those and go, oh my gosh, what is it then? How do you extrapolate that to the kids?
Yeah.
There's 4 or 5 kids in a house where the adults are food insecure. Well, the numbers for the kids in this state are astronomical. And so we have to really be cognizant of that idea that, yes, the kids are cute and we're concerned about them, but it's more as much about that entire family and that entire ecosystem that we have built around those folks, that it's critical for all of us to make sure that we pay attention to that and that we do what we can to find solutions for that. Because you're right, prices are up and they're not going down.
So talk a little bit about finding solutions. What type of work is Thrive doing?
It's interesting when we talk about those 3 key areas, but we are working a lot with food insecurity right now. It tends to bubble to the top, no matter if we're talking about affordable housing or out of school time. It always comes back to food.
Yeah.
Every pilot project that we might try in various areas always has some sort of food component with it. But so what we'll do is, and the work that we're in the middle of right now is this concept of food rescue. And for those of you that are, biblical in any way, you know the story about gleaning a field where farmers in those days would allow folks in need to walk that field after it's been harvested, and they would pick what was left over. today's example is after the fall festivals where all the pumpkin patches are. If you looked at the day after the fall festival, that pumpkin field is still full of pumpkins, but they're really ugly and they're broken, but they're still good food.
Yep.
That's the gleaning part. That's the rescue part. And so what our food security, we have a food security network that's working in Sioux Falls now. They are building a system then around that concept of the broken pumpkins, the ugly pumpkins, or the little squishy tomatoes maybe, they aren't quite right. And let's figure out as a community, how are we going to rescue that food? Let's take that fancy gleaning title of it. Let's talk about rescuing food. The data shows us that worldwide, and particularly in the United States, more than 30% of food just goes to waste. It never gets from the field to my table. And then that how much waste there is just from the stuff that was on my table, how much of it I end up throwing away, right?
Or the stuff that comes into the retail stores and people don't buy, or through retail rescue, Feeding South Dakota is able to receive food. And even for me, a great learning opportunity was that Best By date, and that really is a marketing ploy for the most part, but food is still consumable. And I wish when I was raising my kids, do you know how many boxes of unopened crackers I threw away, or things that probably could have still been eaten and saved me money? But that's just such a great opportunity to connect food that's available to people who need food.
Absolutely. And you used a very nice word that it's a marketing ploy. No, the Best By date is a scam. It really is a scam.
Sorry, USDA.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Michelle said it.
But when you think about it, even the state of California now has outlawed Best By dates because they're misleading. And so the example I use, I have a great friend, and I know she'll watch this and she'll know who she is, but her big contest with herself is to find that really old yogurt in the back of the fridge and see how old it is, and then she'll go on Facebook and say, gonna eat it's this old, the date is whatever. It's sour milk.
Yeah.
It's already sour.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things, that's the reality, is that we need to understand that food lasts a lot longer than we have been led to believe. Because I grew up on Best By dates too. My kids are all like, oh, I don't know about that. So we need to think about that in terms of not only is it not bad food, but that it can be available to folks, even if we've decided that. And the example I always use is the cereal box that is this 4th of July. It's the red and white and blue. It's got sparkly stars on it and everything. 5th of July, that box is worthless.
Yep, comes into our distribution center usually.
Right? That now there is actually a whole industry built up around that. But in the past, that box of cereal would literally go into the trash and end up in your landfill, which is paid by tax dollars, by the way. And so that whole concept of food rescue has become, on a grand scale, really amazing. And so you are able to make sure it gets distributed in certain ways. But there are so many gaps in that system as well. And that's really where this food security network is going after, is this idea of there are folks who are gardening here in town. There are local producers, all kinds of opportunities to rescue food and make sure that, if it's fresh now and maybe a little squishy, it could become, if it's squishy tomatoes, that's just a couple steps from being marinara sauce.
Right, exactly.
Right? So those are the kinds of things that they're working on.
Creative.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they did in September of 24, they did a pilot project with that. And so during this time through the winter, that team is working on building the strategy for, and it will be announced then later this spring, that concept of a community-wide food rescue system.
And I think a little bit of the difference between that, just in conversation and meetings I've been in, is Feeding South Dakota does a lot of retail rescue. So we'll get the damaged cereal boxes or the holiday type stuff, and we'll get bakery items and things like that, which we can turn around and redistribute produce. But we cannot take food from, let's say a restaurant does a spaghetti feed and there's gallons of spaghetti noodles left over. We cannot take that because it's already been, cooked and put out. And, we cannot take, we could take softer tomatoes, but the we'd have to get them out so quickly. And even we'll have people say, I have extra, I have a dozen extra carrots, can I drop them off? And we're grateful, but the amount of people we're serving, that dozen extra carrots is almost difficult. Whereas for your project, you can take those things and you can get them packaged appropriately to be put in the freezer, and you can can the vegetables, and you can then create pieces for families to utilize that are coming from something that, like you said, would have just gone in the trash.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really, we know there are pieces and parts of this system already going. One of the great examples right now, and some of your listeners will know this, about St. Francis House here in Sioux Falls. Doing amazing. They do some of the retail rescue as well. They make runs to some of the chicken restaurants here in town. Those sorts of things are happening, but not enough people know about it. And there are churches that would like to be involved, and how can they, we've got commercial kitchens in churches all over this community, all over the state, that are empty 6 days of the week.
So let's use them.
Let's not go build something new. Let's use the resources we have.
And that really comes back to community being so important in it. And that's what I've loved about the connection made through Thrive. And even just we've connected with a local restaurateur who volunteers at a youth site, and many of those students get the backpack program. And so they want to know what food is going in there, because I'm already there. They're already getting that. I want to teach them how to balance that into a healthy, nutritious meal, or what to add to it, or how to cook it. And I just thought, well, that's so great, because that's not Feeding South Dakota's forte, but it's somebody else's. And they see an opportunity to piggyback on what we're doing to help build success, right? Because it's not just about getting food. It is about getting the right food. To your point earlier about the Red Bull, and it's so important to have that balanced and healthy meal. And other than school, where it's regulated that has to be offered, I don't know that many of our kids are getting that example. I know mine didn't get that example from me. I grew up in the convenience food era, right? Mac and cheese, hot dogs, chicken nuggets, frozen pizza, right? And that's what I carried over to my kids as I was feeding my kids. And now you look at the epidemic in this country of diabetes and obesity and all of these chronic diseases that are going to impact long-term health, that had we been able to just keep with that balanced diet, with that, understanding that having a raw carrot is better than having mac and cheese.
Right.
Yes. And we see, I think, some of that, the produce and vegetables coming into things that look like they're more disguised as like a vegetable-based pastas and things like that to help get that serving in. But really, we have to transition to meeting the need in a way that gives people the best food they need to thrive.
No, that's exactly right. And then we also have to take into account people's resources, because some of those folks are going home to maybe a microwave, maybe a stove that partly works there, and don't give them a whole turkey, because there's not an oven that works in the home.
Yeah, our Thanksgiving meal distribution, we actually now give out a turkey breast, like a 4-pound turkey breast, because the whole turkey was just too much. Yeah. Even storing it for people was too much.
No, exactly. So that's part of that fairness issue, right? That we as we come into alongside folks that are in need, we have to think about it in different ways. And so that's one of the, we talk about partnerships with Thrive and the collaborations that we're doing. SDSU Extension is super involved with.
They're so great.
Right? And they'll come into a school, into an after-school program and go, okay, this is what you got in your backpack this week. Let's make a cheese quesadilla in the microwave, which is the only thing you have, right? Or they teach them about making smoothies, and, you got to can peaches and whatever and mix it together, and here's how those things work. It really does have an impact. And it's all of us coming together. I don't need to know how to make a smoothie out of a can of peaches.
Right.
But, somebody who's walking home with that in their backpack does.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing way for us all to kind of learn that.
And then also just connecting people to those resources and helping them understand that, we've had great partners too that will come in and be at a mobile food distribution and provide information on dietitian services that they can offer at no cost, or even just recipes for some of the food that's in the distribution that we're giving out. And it's just so important. The more we can help people with all of the things, again, we're going back to that, setting them up for success and being able to expand on that. So if you think about the last 3 years, and I'm going to say COVID, the dreaded COVID. I mean, if that's just like a mark in time for so many people. But I mentioned earlier that, food insecurity rate has been rising. What does that look like in Sioux Falls?
We, in addition to COVID, some other things happened in Sioux Falls at the same time, and it's happening in some other communities around not only South Dakota, but the region. But some of our large retailers are also saying, time out, we've got too many stores. And so in addition to COVID, where all of the supply chain issues and everything was so messed up, we've also then lost some of our major retailers, particularly around groceries. And so in Sioux Falls, one of the impacts of that then is that concept of a food desert, and that's a technical term. It sounds funky.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit.
So a food desert is really a place where folks are living in lower income situations.
Okay.
And it's difficult to get to and access for groceries, particularly groceries. There may be restaurants that doesn't count, particularly for our low-income folks.
Does a gas station count?
No.
Does
no.
a dollar store, Dollar General count?
No. And actually, I
Yeah,
could talk
no,
about Dollar
let's-
General
yeah,
for a long time.
yes.
There are specifically those dollar-type stores will come into a neighborhood and they can create a food desert because they aren't able to, nor do they want to, provide the entire gamut of what you need to be a true grocery store.
Because they have food. I mean, you can get things at places like that, but it's not truly the full access.
No. You very likely won't find fresh dairy of any kind. You won't find produce.
Yeah.
And you won't find just foods you could put. It's going to be all processed food.
Yeah,
so high salt, high fat.
And you're not going to find ground beef or pork or things like that. And while I think it's great that there's something there, I think that they're taking up space, also retail space in an area that needs more than what they're able to provide.
Right. Exactly.
So that was the sidebar.
Right.
Back
exactly.
to food deserts.
So when we talk about food deserts, in Sioux Falls, there's 60,000 plus people who actually live inside technical food deserts. Now we know that there are a portion of those folks that are not affected by the food desert because they can get in their Ford pickup and drive to the grocery store.
Okay, so hold on. I'm going to back up a little bit because the population of Sioux Falls is just over 300,000. And you're talking about 60,000 people live in neighborhoods that don't have food access.
Yeah.
In our largest city in the state.
Yeah. And
Wow.
by USDA standards, it varies. It can be a half a mile or a mile from your home. I always go with the mile because it's still walkable. But when that grocery store closed in Sioux Falls, one of the neighborhood meetings I was in, there was a mom talking about when the grocery store was still open, she would take every child in the house that could hold a grocery sack. They'd all hike to the store because then you've got more people to carry more groceries, right? And the way that then the fast food chains in that same neighborhood, business went crazy because you could get burgers for $1 after the grocery store closed. And so we know, 60,000 plus people in food deserts, about 11,500, maybe about 12,000 at this point, are truly those low-income or poverty situations that are also inside that food desert. So that really began a conversation or brought to light a conversation that had been happening in Sioux Falls for a long time around that concept of access. We've talked about transportation and all of those things, but when we talk about getting food to people who are hungry, people who really need it, we have to think differently. And so at that time, it was just coming out of the pandemic when that store closed, and the city actually took some federal dollars, the ARPA funds that were available based on just supporting the communities across the country during COVID. and they said, let's see what we can figure out when it comes to particularly that expanded food desert that we had. We have and it's still on our website, a interactive map where you can turn that store off and on, and it turns orange. The desert turns orange, and it's huge. It's just mind-boggling the number of people that were affected by that one little grocery store. And so there were a group of folks that went after that grant, and the concept that came out of that, and we did it through that, as I said earlier, the collective impact model. It's putting all the paper on the walls and talking through and thinking of all the crazy ideas. No idea is bad.
Right.
You know, those levels of conversation, that was really where that idea was born of a true grocery store on wheels in Sioux Falls. Now, that's never been done in South Dakota, and is at this point still the only one in South Dakota, but we're creating a prototype, we think. And so it wasn't that Thrive intended to go into the grocery business, but this group of folks that came together, and when we talk about collective impact and that work that we do collaboratively, we never call it committees. There's never any votes. There's never any, I move this and I second. And it really is about a consensus. And it's everyone buying into the model, everyone buying into the idea. And if I don't like the idea, can I find a better solution? And can we all walk through it together and talk it out so that we find the best solution? And so that group came together. They ended up winning that grant. And they were originally going to, God help us all, put it on an old city bus.
Oh, gosh.
Right? It would have been fine, I'm sure, eventually. But things happen, and so, God bless Feeding South Dakota. There was sitting in in West River in Rapid City, this beautiful trailer and Dodge Ram pickup that were a donation, and they were being used originally as a food pantry in part of Rapid City, and it just, for a lot of reasons, it was too small for that, and I understand that, but we took that part of that grant money and then got a couple of other grants and purchased it. So that part of that donation that was that truck and trailer to Feeding South Dakota, part of that donation was restored by us buying that. And so we are running that prototype of a mobile grocery store. It's called the Eat Well Sioux Falls Mobile Market, and it is on a customized trailer. It's 38 feet long, and it's pulled by this Dodge Ram pickup. And it's one of those things that when we start to talk about food access and we talk about those various locations where you have your mobile distributions, if on kind of the off week or the midweek or the mid-month period, that mobile market can come into that neighborhood, that then starts to add to the lessen the stress, right? It lessens the need. And the other piece of it, and I learned this from Lori Dykstra, this concept that there are some communities in South Dakota where if there's not a grocery store and you don't have transportation, you may qualify for federal SNAP benefits, right? The old food stamps for folks that haven't kept up with the terminology. You might qualify for them, but you can't use them.
How are you going to use it?
There's no grocery store. And so that's kind of the model that we're really thinking about and we talk about Thrive being, cradle to career workforce development. People say, how in the world does a grocery store on wheels fit that?
Well, let me tell you.
It absolutely does, because it's that idea of, again, those kids are our future. Their parents right now are doing their dang best to be able to get to work, to pay the bills, to keep their kids in school. We can support them as a community by helping them find easily accessible, affordable groceries.
Because when you're not worrying about how you're going to feed your family or if there's going to be food on the table, you can move on to the next thing. You can move on to the next thing that will change your situation. But I want to talk a little bit about who you serve, because that is something too that was a big eye-opener for me when I came to work at Feeding South Dakota 3 years ago. And I think that a lot of people just have in their mind this idea or this picture of who is utilizing our programs. And so talk a little bit about when your mobile grocery store is out and about, or you're working, on the food rescue. I was going to say gleaning, but when you're working on that stuff, who's receiving this food? Who's using these services?
I very often am because our office is, we're nomads, right? We don't have a fixed office, so I very often have meetings in coffee shops. When I'm having this conversation, I point at the barista over there. That's the person we're serving.
Yeah.
It is blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people who are just are struggling just as much as anyone else in this community. And it is not just, I mean, I often talk about north of 18th Street being the real struggles, but there are pockets of poverty all around us in Sioux Falls, no matter what neighborhood you live in. And so it is those folks that are providing services for us. When we look at income distribution in the community, we talk about our paramedics, we talk about our preschool teachers, we talk about our firefighters in some cases, those, first time just out of school folks, not making a whole lot of money. And that's not a dig.
No.
It's just the beginnings of a career. These are good, hardworking folks. Well, the mobile market is one of those places where they can help make ends meet.
Sure.
And so, I mean, one of my best stories is it's open now in 7 neighborhoods and five days a week, and we do pop-ups on the weekends. But when we first introduced it in the Lowell Elementary neighborhood, we're over there taking pictures and doing all the things, and this dad walks in. And he's got his kids because he just picked them up from school, and he looks around and he goes, "Wait a minute, what is this? That whole idea that you're bringing a grocery store
to me."
And I said, yeah, so, you come pick up the kids in there. They're on Fridays at Lowell, and there's frozen pizzas in the freezer there. Pick up the kids, pick up the pizza. Friday night's taken care of. And he goes, you bet it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So you think about how easy I'm incredibly blessed in this community. I've been given so many things, and I have an amazing life. But to just have Friday evening to go, chilling, kids, let's put a movie on, let's, like anyone else.
Let's enjoy our time together. And
exactly. It just adds to that feeling of normalcy. Yeah, for tonight, I don't have to worry about whether I've got enough money to put dinner on the table.
Yeah, and it's even, things that we learn but maybe don't talk about often are college hunger, kids in college. Yes, there's food service on campus, but not always something people can indulge in or afford. College kids might be working and going to college and still don't have the funds because you're paying for your parking, or you're paying for your gas to get to work and back, or you're trying to focus on school, and so the work isn't the greatest amount of time, but yet they need that degree and they need that education in order to set them up for success. Veteran hunger, these people who have served and are serving our country and continue to need the access to food and the pay increases, and that's a very real thing. Seniors, people who are close to retirement or retired, and as you age into that time of life, your medical costs go up, your transportation and just ability to be mobile sometimes decreases. And so that all impacts that food access, and having a solution that can come to people. I could picture my grandma, getting all ready and making sure her hair is good and she's got her purse to go head to the market on Tuesday. Because it's
social.
Yeah.
It's a social place, right? And so, 2 of our best stops for the mobile market are at Dalrymple Village and at Active Generations, because, one, that generation understands a good deal, and it's social. They come in and they have fun, and they love the staff, and it's just... It's that time, and it is making a difference. As people start to plan for their retirement, and you talk about what's a fixed income. When somebody says to you they're on a fixed income, that is a tight budget, and it does not figure for full inflation. There's not room. There's not room to squeak anything with that. And so any place that they can find ways to reduce those costs are going to be huge. And so this is one option.
And they shouldn't have to make a choice between medication or food, because they're both equally important. So, well, what do you envision for the future of Thrive? You're very young. You're just getting started. You've got some great things happening. What do you think the future of Thrive looks like?
When we talk about that concept of cradle to career workforce development, absolutely the sky's the limit. I mean, certainly we're going to find solutions, fill some of those gaps, but as we fill some of them, others will open up. And this community is growing at a dramatic rate.
Yes.
And so as we grow, we bring in some amazing, wonderful people, lots of physicians and lots of people that are bankers and lawyers and whatever. We're also bringing in those folks that are lower income. And we have lots of new neighbors from places outside of our borders. And so the opportunities for everyone continue to lay out Thrive's path. It really is that concept of, we're at that point where, a member of our board says, we've been an infant and now we've grown up a little bit and we're kind of a precocious second grader now. What happens after second grade? Well, you really do grow and thrive and mature. And so we're at that point where we're looking at, what does the community think about this concept of trying things and building? It's almost like an incubator sort of situation.
Innovative solutions.
Yeah. And are you willing as a community to give it a shot and be okay that, that one fell flat on its face maybe. And there are a couple of things we've swept under the rug and didn't work, but that's okay. And I think if Thrive has that reputation of being that nimble, we are young, we're a little crazy, we're willing to take risks, then is the community willing to buy into that? And let's go from there then with this vision for what's next for us as a community.
That sounds more like you're a teenager. You're young.
Yeah, probably.
You're willing to take risks.
Yes.
So 50 years ago, Feeding South Dakota originated when the Sioux Falls Ministerial Association opened the first food pantry. And in 1975, the country was just coming out of a recession. Well, didn't know it, but they would be coming out of a recession. And so obviously there was an identified need. There's not a food insecurity rate from 1975. But, the whole state was about 3 times the size of Sioux Falls right now, the entire state's population. I-90 was finished in 1975, 50 years ago. The cost of goods had gone up. A lot of things had happened that were innovative and connecting and helped do things more efficiently and better, while at the same time there were challenges in front of the people of that time. That sounds like I'm talking about prehistoric time, but I'm not.
50 years, that's a long time ago, man.
So, really, I think what Thrive is doing is the future of helping to end hunger in South Dakota. And I really appreciate that we can come together, and I talk a lot about coming together with like-minded people. And when you get enough like-minded people together, the things you can do are incredible. And the excitement that you generate and those creative, off-the-wall ideas that can stick sometimes. And so I think it's really exciting because for 50 years, Feeding South Dakota has built its foundation. We've been the infant and the toddler and the teenager, and we've built this foundation, and we've overcome a worldwide pandemic and figured out how to continue the work in that process. But we also recognize that it's because of community, and it's because of organizations like Thrive, and it's because of donors and supporters and all the ways that we can collaborate and innovate, and knowing that that's your strength. Thrive's strength is innovating, and Feeding South Dakota's is logistics and sourcing. We kind of create this super team of what we can do. And so as you have shared your vision for community leading that, I think that really leans into our vision for ending hunger, and communities know what they need. And we just have to listen, and we have to help provide those solutions within the communities so that we can really, truly help people to be the best that they can be. And I'm a little jealous of the Thrive title because it really feeds into what we want. If
Right.
we want a healthy South Dakota, we want people to thrive.
So exactly.
That's
That's why, selfishly, we try to have Feeding South Dakota representation on just about every team that we've got going, because of that concept of everything coming back to food and that willingness to think creatively.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly it, and that is how it works. It's not about politics. It's not about whether you're red or blue or green or purple.
Yeah.
It is about the goals for the community
Yep.
and the goals for our future success. And if we're going to grow as a community and succeed, and these kids that are coming up behind us are going to take care of us
Yeah.
and be our future workforce,
Yeah.
we got to all be in this together, and that's really what that's about.
And if our state's going to continue to grow in the way that it has in the last 50 years, we want those food deserts to shrink, and we want everybody to have that great opportunity.
No, exactly.
Well, thank you for being with us
Yeah.
today. We really appreciate it. Before you go, I have one question for you.
Okay.
If Sioux Falls were a fruit or vegetable, what would it be and why?
I think that Sioux Falls is an orange.
Okay. Tell me about
It's
that.
sweet and juicy on the inside.
Okay.
And then that peeling is a little tough, but it adds to and holds together all of that. But then when you think about when you take that peeling off, because I would compost, I'm a gardener, that peeling then goes into and making really great soil. And so I'm going with an orange.
That is an excellent, excellent choice. I think that describes it very well. Well, thank you for joining us today in our conversation with Michelle. We've had a great time talking about all the opportunities and innovations that are happening here in Sioux Falls through Sioux Falls Thrive, and the work that they're doing not just in the role of food insecurity, but also in those social determinants of health and the root causes, and all of the things that are important in the mission to end hunger. We hope you join us for our next conversation with 50 Faces of Feeding South Dakota.